obviously you have 25 years experience in the immigration space, as you said, so you already know what is the peace of mind for your customers. But back when you were starting, did you have that in mind, how you did the transition, and did the thinking to come up with that proposition that is unique and compelling to engage the audience?
Yeah, great question. When I first started out doing Hong Kong immigration exclusively, I didn't understand I was selling peace of mind. I believed I was selling a service that resulted in somebody getting permission to live and work in Hong Kong. But over time, as I became more experienced with the reactions that clients had to the immigration service that we were giving them, I knew that something else was going on at the emotional level, but I wasn't in a position to empathize with that because I didn't have an immigration problem myself. My family didn't have an immigration problem myself. We've been permanent residents since 1997, right? But it's when I relocated my young family from Hong Kong to Western Australia at the end of 2000 and I started my sort of Australia-Hong Kong commute. I put my family through an immigration journey for us to become ultimately citizens in Australia, and it was a 12-year-long journey. And the immigration program that I chose was, in hindsight, not the best for us because of the experience that we encountered, and because the fact is it cost me $1.5 million Australian dollars investment in a company that never made any money. And if I'd have looked at a more cost-effective way of becoming a resident and then ultimately a citizen in Australia, I could have chosen other means to do that. Anyway, be that as it may, the good news about all of that was that it meant that I put my family on an immigration journey in Australia. So it meant trying to get the visa in the first instance, and the emotional responses to that, conversations with my wife, where we're going to live, what are we going to do about children's education, how is our life actually going to look if I'm working in Hong Kong and family's living in Australia and I'm going to be commuting. Before you even get the visa, you go through that sort of emotional roller coaster of, indeterminate outcomes to the decisions that you're making, and you become emotionally invested in that. And then as an immigrant, so to speak, you begin to sort of empathize and understand what it feels like to be going through that part of the process. Can you get that visa? Okay, so then after you get the visa, in our instance at least, you have 4 years to sort of, get on with the plan for life in Hong Kong and for the business, in my instance, under that immigration program that I needed to develop in order to sustain my continuing residence in Australia for my family. So 4 years sounds like a long time, but, once you get sort of into 2.5 years of it, that the documentation that you need at 4 years to be able to extend your stay or to adjust your immigration status, upwards from, say, a temporary residence situation to a permanent residence situation, meant that, for the first couple of years I didn't really think too much about it, but by the time we got to 2.5 years, I needed to really turn my attention to what I was doing commercially and making sure that that was going to ultimately work for immigration purposes. So we had another 1.5 years until we got to 4 years of sort of, all the decisions that I was making commercially were done with an eye on immigration. And then when we got to coming up to the 4-year mark, it was a case of, to get continuing privileges to live in Australia, I have to demonstrate that I've been doing things, that accord with the conditions of the visa grant. So really there for another 1.5 years until we get to 4 years, we've got the sort of Damocles hanging over our heads. Will we be able to extend? Will we not be able to extend? What does it mean for the kids in school? All the children have got all their relationships here now. They've now become Australian kids. They really don't know what Hong Kong's all about. If Australia doesn't work for us, then we have to move the family back to Hong Kong. So it goes on and on and on and on. So I became invested emotionally in that experience, and then we got what was really a 2-year extension of stay strategically because of the way the program worked. So we sort of, we kicked the can down the road for another year or so, and then it was a case of making another application for another visa type that would then allow us to sort of, cross from temporary residence to permanent residency. And there again we had the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads, and as a family we understand what it feels like. So anyway, the upshot of all of this is that the relocation to Australia meant that for 12 years I personally, along with my family, went through an immigration experience, and that tempered completely how I approached the idea of what we're selling in Hong Kong Visa Centre, because I knew actually what I really was looking for whenever I embarked on my Australian immigration journey. Anyone that was giving me any advice on that, and I always instructed professionals, I never did it myself even though I'm an immigration lawyer, because I know what's involved. I realised what I was buying when I went in to speak to these people. I wanted to come out of that meeting knowing, my problem's solved, I can sort that out. And I knew that's it. I'm selling peace of mind, because that's what I was looking for myself in my journey. So because of that insight, being able to put myself on the other side of the fence, as it were, I could then develop a proposition for the Hong Kong Visa Centre that was driven by the single idea that we knew what we sell, and what we sell is peace of mind.